What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Shank, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. This week, I sit down with Ken Davenport. Ken is a Tony Award-winning Broadway producer and an Inc. 5000 entrepreneur whose credits include Once on This Island, The Play That Goes Wrong, Groundhog Day, Deaf West, Theater Spring Awakening, Godspell, Kinky Boots, and so many more. Honestly, this guy's list of accolades within production, marketing, business is too long to list. You guys are going to have to listen to this episode to get the full idea of how smart this man's mind really is. I think you guys are going to love this conversation. We talk about how Broadway has really been affected and shut down fully by COVID-19 and where they're going to go from here, and how do we take marketing tactics into our business that he's learned in Broadway to really blow up these productions that he's put together. It's really, really creative. He's actually putting out some content from dramaticmarketing.com. I highly recommend you guys go sign up for it. He really thinks out of the box in ways to get free marketing that stands out and gets you to the top without spending a ton of money. So if you're an entrepreneur, this is a can't miss. If you're somebody who likes Broadway, this is a can't miss. If you're somebody who likes really good conversation, make sure you listen to the whole thing. Now, before we get to this conversation, I want to remind you guys that Growth Now Movement Live is just around the corner. September 25, 26, right here in Reading, Pennsylvania. We are all coming together to celebrate, to uplift, and to truly improve our lives. So if you want to be there, head over to gnmlive.com. Grab your tickets now because they will sell out. I cannot wait to see you guys there. Now, without further ado, let's get to this episode with Ken Davenport. Ken, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
For sure. You know, Philip Stutz introduced us, and I had told you before I record that if he introduces me to somebody, I interview them because he's obviously very well connected with super interesting people who can bring a ton of great value to my audience. And after I did research on you, I was like, this is going to be a lot of fun. You know, you're somebody who's won multiple Tony Awards as a producer of Broadway plays and all of these other things. But why don't we take a minute and talk about who you are today? And then we have about 10,000 things I want to talk about because your world is turned upside down.
Yeah, so I am a Broadway producer, or what I call an archpreneur, because I am really an entrepreneur. I just happen to dedicate my time to the arts. I'm a big believer in that. A lot of people want, the theater, it's some mystical business. What happens behind the curtain? You know, I'm a big believer in that a product is a product is a product, and a business is a business is a business. And producing, developing, creating a Broadway show is no different than opening a restaurant, developing a new app, creating a new straw, whatever it is. It's the same process. So one of the things that my mission statement is to demystify the Broadway industry. And I help a lot of people inside my industry treat it more like a business. So that's what I've done. I've been producing and developing shows for about 15 years. Before that, I was managing shows. But I've always had this entrepreneurial bug ever since I opened a candy store in my father's cardiologist office. So I was selling chocolate bars to heart patients.
That's great. Dude, that's like your prime target. They can't say no, right? They're in there for a reason.
Actually, I learned a little bit of 80-20 rule right there, because there would be days where I'd be like, I made a fortune today. It was when my father had his most secretaries working. I found that they purchased the most, of course, because they were around most often.
Yeah, I love it. So why Broadway? Like, what brought you to that? Obviously, people can hear you say, like, clearly you just have a business mind, but what drew you to the arts and what drew you to Broadway?
So like most people with anything, you know, I was exposed to the arts and the theater as a kid. My mother tells me I first kicked while she was watching a Broadway musical, Godspell. And then they got me involved in the theater when I was 5. in the local community theater. And I got hooked. I got too cool for it when I was about 10 or 11, quit, thought I was going to play for the Boston Red Sox and the Boston Celtics simultaneously, like I was going to be that guy. But, and then got rebit by the bug my senior year of high school when I saw Les Mis. And I remember it moving me so much that I said to myself, I was going to be a lawyer before this. And I remember being moved, saying, like, that's what I want to do. I want to move people like this show moved me. And I was an actor. That's how most of us get started in the business. But my business mind took over. I got bored with being on stage, and I started to pursue the other business avenues along the way. But like most people, if you talk to golfers, they got into it when they were kids, professional golfers. So it's like anything. The more exposed you are as a kid, the more likely you're going to pick it up in the future.
No, for sure. And I it's funny because I did plays and stuff when I was a kid, and then took the sabbatical, then went back, I think, for like 1 or 2 years of high school. And then I kind of just was like, I'm not very good at this, so I'm just going to stop doing this. But my older sister, she was actually a drama major in college, and went on for a short time to work for the Shakespeare Theater in DC, and did all that stuff. And now she's a teacher. But, it's interesting to see like how you, especially in theater, you can evolve into so many different avenues, whether it's, set production, costume design, or just, theater production overall. So talk to me a little bit about that, because I think some people listening might go, well, what's a producer of a Broadway show do? I know I see it on the credits all the time on a movie, and I hear about it, but what do you do? What is the overall aspect of you for every show?
So I've had a blog for about 11 years, and that right there is the most common question I get. And actually, one of the most read blog posts I've ever written was something I didn't even write. I got a question from like an 11-year-old girl at the time saying, what does a producer do? And I tried to answer it, and I was like, what the F do I do? I don't even know. So I asked 100 of my peers, and I said, tell me in one sentence what a Broadway producer does. And I posted all those answers. And it was very widely read. And, again, to the point that Broadway shows Broadway show is a product, I think that a Broadway producer is like the CEO of a company or the president of a company, or more apt is a description is a founder of a startup. Because when I produce a new musical or a new play, it's a brand new product that has never existed before. So I have to develop that product just like you would, again, develop an app, develop a new speaker, develop a new microphone, whatever it is. Then I have to put the management team together. I have to market it. I have to do all these things to bring that product to market. So it's the same thing as being the head of any business. It's not some mysterious position. I don't walk around in a tuxedo and tails all day and a top hat and have drinks at Sardi's. No, I'm just a startup guy like most people. It's just I'm a startup guy in the arts.
Yeah, and you're a startup guy over and over and over again. I imagine every time you're like, okay, we're going to do this, you start from ground zero. And that's the crazy part. So as an entrepreneur, I go, well, the business that I have, I've built over 4 years, right? And so I can't even imagine, I don't want to restart. I don't want to reset, right? Like, so you do that on purpose regularly. And, obviously you have things and some of the shows that you're attached to. I mean, I saw Kinky Boots, and that's one that you won a Tony for. And Will Ferrell's Bush thing, I thought that was pretty cool. I saw that on your website. I loved that show, by the way, that extremely impressive. And so how do you even get involved in these things? Like, how do you decide what shows you want to start to build out and why? Like, what's the reason behind the ones you choose?
Well, it's a great point. I do call myself a serial startup guy, whereas most people will do a company every few years, maybe if they're even a serial entrepreneur. But I can do 1 or 2 shows a year and have several more in development. I'm only as good as my next show, in fact. So unless you're going to hit a Hamilton or Les Mis or one of these that is just going to be the gusher that'll take care of you for the rest of your life, you have to keep developing product. And it's an entirely new product. It's an entirely new team. It's an entirely new capital raise. So I'm raising money constantly. Wow. So it's a challenge. How I get involved is I produce what I would want to see myself. So I produce what I love, whether or with people that I love. Again, it's just like other industries. Something that I would use every day. Like Peter Lynch, the investment guru, would say, like, invest in what you'd use. Well, I produce what I would want to see. And I believe part of my success so far has been that I have a pretty good idea of what my market wants to see. Like my tastes are aligned with the Broadway market. And the Broadway market is a very unique market. It's not the same market that's in Alabama, in Alaska, in Japan. The Broadway market is 65% tourist. We out of the tri-state area, 18 to 19% international. So the rest is local, right? So I have to produce shows that the tourists want to see, that the folks coming from Texas, that coming from Alabama, what are the musicals and plays that they want to see? And that's very different than a lot of what sometimes an Upper East Side New Yorker may want to see. But at the end of the day, I make decisions like I'm going to spend a lot of time with this project. I have to love it. It's got to be something I want to see every day. And also, we have only a 20% success rate in this business. Only 20% of our shows actually make money. So I often say that you better love what you're producing because most likely it's not going to be the one that pays off. And you still want to be able to look at that poster on your wall and being like, you know what, that didn't make us any money, but I'm so proud that I did that.
Yeah. So when you're talking about raising capital, how do you go back? Say you're in that 80% run and back to back, you're not making money. What do you do to go back to the well to fund the next project? Is it just the idea and knowing that we're only hitting a home run, 2 out of 10 times?
Part of that with investors is managing their expectations. And I've written a book actually called How to Raise Money for the Arts or Anything, because raising money for the arts is one of the most difficult things to raise money for, because our economic model is so fragile, and as we're proving right now, and a little constrained. But that said, when you hit it in the arts, you hit it huge, right? It is like drilling for oil. I always say you got to drill a lot of holes, but eventually if you will find a gusher and it'll pay for the empty holes. So look, people that invest in the theater love the theater. They love it usually. That's the first thing. They have to love it.
Right.
And then again, it's managing their expectations. I've been known to say to a first-time investor, write this check like you're never going to see it again. I can't guarantee you a return. I can guarantee you an experience unlike you have had ever before investing in anything else. I will take you to opening nights. You will meet celebrities. You will get free swag. You will be around tech rehearsals. You will participate in a way that you can't participate when you invest in a REIT, right? Or invest in it's passion investing, but it's also delivering an experience. And when it works big time.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you had very quickly briefed, gone over the economic times as we're experiencing right now. And if anything, and obviously we can talk about all major sports and how finally they think they have a date for baseball, which I'm extremely excited about. But, you go, well, okay, you're in the heart of this. Like at least in the United States, you're in the heart of this pandemic that has spread all over the country and has truly infected a lot of businesses. And you're in the business of, we hope that we can jam pack as many people as we can into this theater as close as possible to enjoy this experience that doesn't necessarily involve masks. So what are you doing and what have you done over the last 3 months to go, okay, here's what's happening. How are we going to react and how are we going to make this worth our while long term?
Yeah, the theater industry is one of the hardest hit industries on the planet because we have no alternative. So restaurants have been hit very, very hard, but at least they can do takeout and curbside pickup. Like we can't do that with the theater. We either have a full theater or we don't. We've actually gone to the government here and said, we don't want to come back under social distancing guidelines. Like we don't believe it creates the right experience. This is a very widely read blog I wrote last week about why social distancing doesn't work in the theater. An experience in the theater where there's 6 empty seats between you and the next person, it just doesn't create the same energy and the right excitement. I don't care if you're watching Hamilton, it's just not going to feel the same as with a full house. So, we're doing lots of thinking and reacting and pivoting. Of course, streaming is something that I actually was the first producer to live stream a show back in 2015.
Wow.
And it was very, very successful. And the industry is finally catching up to that a bit. We're behind because, frankly, if we had more content recorded, this would be a much easier time for us. So there's a lot. I've been hosting a live stream. There's been lots of live streamed opportunities to watch performers and do things. So that's been good. And we're thinking about the future. You know, our economic model is very fragile, and we're trying to come up with ways to make that different when we come back. But right now, we have to not only get past what this difficult period, we have to make sure our customers are comfortable coming back. Like, we're not going to come back until they are comfortable, because it doesn't do anything for us to open the theaters. If people don't want to come, what's the point?
Yeah. No, and I agree. And it's interesting. So one thing you don't know about me is you might not know about me, I host a yearly event. And it was supposed to be May 15 and 16. Obviously got pushed back, and now we're looking at late September, and it looks like we can move forward as long as the guidelines don't go back into, at least in Pennsylvania, don't go back into what it was before, because I'll just keep it under 250. But you talked about the experience that you create in a theater and the energy of the people together, and that's something that I said I won't go into doing my event if masks are mandatory, because it was about human connection. It was about people being together and seeing the smiling faces. And so how much do you think about that as you're producing a show of, like, how do we create this energy for people to go, once they leave, they don't stop talking about the show for 6 months? Like, that's my goal every single time I have my live event, is to say, cool, I want you to go, but then I don't want you to forget about this for 6 months like it was yesterday. Do you think about that kind of stuff when you're producing this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was just rereading Contagious by Jonah Berger, which has a very ironic title now. But it's all about that, this residual word of mouth. Like, the number one thing that sells, I believe, most products is word of mouth. It's not billboard advertising. It's not email. It's word of mouth. It's someone saying, I experienced this product. It's amazing. Movie, book, razor, musical, whatever it is, your conference. And we got to get people talking about it. So you do that by creating the most exciting experience possible. That word of mouth is never hotter the moment that conference, that musical, that play, that live event is over. That's when people are hyped up, jazzed up, shot with a steroid shot of excitement, inspiration, motivation. And you have to capture that. Like, that's when you're going to capture the most word of mouth. And if you can't build that energy up, it's just not worth it. And I like to use the analogy of, like, my job when I produce a musical is to imagine that the theater is like a soda can. And all that I want to do for the 90 minutes to 2.5 hours before the end is shake that soda can up so hard that when I open the doors, it's like popping the top on a shaken up soda can, and it just bursts all through the streets. And all those people run and tell everyone they know. So that's 100% my job. And you do that with great content, of course, but you do that with sets, and some people at events will do that with confetti and like whatever it is, customer relations, like all that stuff goes into making an experience that people will keep talking about 6 months later. And when someone says 3 months, oh, I saw a play last night, your fan goes, oh, that couldn't have been anything compared to the one I saw.
Yeah.
Like, that's your goal.
That's awesome. So you'd mentioned being the first producer to live stream a show back in 2015. Do you find yourself constantly trying to, or finding yourself one step ahead of everybody in the marketing processes of these shows? As you're building this out, I know that obviously, you being a friend of Philip's, we can only assume that marketing is a strength of yours, because that guy could talk it all day long. But what other things have you done in this space, or you've seen work in other industries, to really begin to market something in a unique way?
Yeah, I have been known as a bit of a marketing guy in my business, and it's not really patting myself on the back to say I'm on the forefront of a lot of stuff. One, because I just like to try things. Two, when I started in this business, I was the youngest producer doing it, and I was willing to adopt new technology. I wasn't afraid to try things, whereas some of the more older guard producer were just used to doing it the old way. And that's, my business is 10 years behind everybody else. And that's because our customers are 10 years older than everybody else, right? the movie industry catered. They love the 18 to 25 target demo for movies. I could give a crap about that. That's actually not true. I'm developing new audiences, and I love shows that appeal to new audience. But the 18 to 25-year-olds don't make the bulk of like full price theater. Right. So we have to focus on the older ones, and the older ones are what drive us. So advertising on TikTok, marketing on TikTok does nothing for me. Does nothing. Like that's not where you're going to see me. So out of really desperation when I got started, because my first show is a very small show called The Awesome 80s Prom, and a show called My First Time, and these off-Broadway little startups. I had no money, no marketing dollars. So I had to develop this formula and this strategy on how to get massive amounts of attention with no money. And so I've done a variety of things over the years, and how can I generate millions of dollars worth of impressions really for nothing, which has usually involved the press and how I generate awareness, because that's the biggest thing. In a cluttered, if you read breakthrough advertising, you'll hear that when you're in a cluttered competitive market, the biggest challenge for a new product is awareness, right? Imagine you're trying to launch a laundry detergent today. How are you going to get awareness over Tide? It's going to be hard. That's what it's like on Broadway. Phantom of the Opera, Lion King, all these shows. How does a new show, maybe it's totally original, not based on a movie, how do you get attention? Or a small show? So I started doing a whole bunch of things to generate press. One of my most famous was I did a show called My First Time, which is about exactly what you think it's about. People sharing their first sexual experience that I got from a website. And I remember thinking, who should see this show for free? Virgins should see this show first and for free. I'll let them get in for free on opening night, the first night. So I did a promotion, Virgins get in free for My First Time. And then I hired a mind reader, someone with a PhD in nonverbal communication, to be able to ask people at the line at the box office whether they were a virgin or not, and determine if they were lying, and let them in. Huge attention, homepages.
That's
CNN.
awesome.
Yeah, Jay Leno did a joke about it in his monologue, and massive amounts of awareness. That's one example.
Wait, can we talk about that for a second? And then I want to hear more examples. What was that like when you heard, I don't know if you saw it live, but when you heard Jay Leno was making a joke about what you created, to drive traffic?
Yeah, I didn't hear it live. Someone texted me and was like, did you just see Jay Leno? And this is how you know when something is really hit. When you've heard something from 3 people, and all of a sudden in the next hour, I got 2 or 3 emails or texts saying, and I was like, uh-oh. And it had already blown up. I mean, it had already gone a lot of places, CNN, everywhere. But that was the crown jewel for me. It really was. I was like, wow, when you've made it into a monologue, you've really achieved pop culture. It means it's filtered, obviously hit mainstream press and filtered down to that writer's room because they sort through all that stuff.
Right.
So it was amazing. And that's like really a goal now. It's like, what do I need to do? And that's how I've come up with a formula to try to get there, which I've applied over and over again to every show that I do. I try to come up with one thing that breaks me through and gets me massive amounts of attention and awareness with no money. That's my goal and my challenge for myself with every show that I do.
No, and I love that. And so I think about and I want to get into more tactics so I can steal them, to be completely transparent with you. But that's kind of what I've done to build everything that I've done, right? Like if you look at any business model that I've ever created, it was, okay, how do I create something for free, then make the money, and then use that capital to put back into the business, instead of saying, oh, here's my money, let me dump it in, and I could potentially lose it. Like even the live event, I didn't spend a dime until I started selling tickets, and I wasn't committed to anything until I started selling tickets. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. So what other tactics have you taken into the marketing world to get attention, to stand out from the crowd? Because like you said, you're battling giants a lot of the times. So what have you done to continue to stand out?
Well, battling the giants is a great way to put it, because you're not going to beat a giant with their tactics if you're not a giant. Right. You're not going to go face to face with a giant and try to swing a club at him. Like, you're just not going to do it. You have to go another route. So that's what I've tried to do. I don't try to outspend. I try to outmaneuver. I try to move faster. and try to do things that they can't do, right? That they wouldn't do, too risky, too whatever. I do them. Live streaming, we talked about. Like I live streamed that show. No one had ever done it. Got massive amounts of press. One of the most recent ones was something, and this is what I do is a lot, is I listen to the market and then create something that they're already talking about. So for example, I won a Tony Award for the revival of Once on This Island on Broadway a couple years ago. And that was a very unique show to create that experience we were talking about. I did things in the theater that had never been done before. The director really developed an immersive show. He had wind, like blowing back people's hair. There were fire, there was water, there was rain on stage, and there were animals, a chicken and a goat. And I used to hear people talk about this goat all the time, including, by the way, we did a focus group on the show, like a quantitative and qualitative analysis of customers. And they talked about the goat, even people who hadn't seen the show. So I remember thinking, wow, this goat has penetrated. This is a word of mouth opportunity. So the night of the Tony Awards, my wife came to me and was like, or not the night, like a week before, she was like, oh, I can't wait to walk the red carpet on the Tony Awards. I've got a dress. And I was like, sweetheart, I have bad news for you. I can't take you on the red carpet to the Tony Awards because I have another date. And she was like, what? And I said, yes, I'm taking Sparky, the goat from Once on This Island. So now if you Google Ken Davenport goat, you will see pictures of me in a tuxedo and a goat in a tuxedo all over the place. And it got massive amounts of attention on sites where a Broadway show would never get attention. Yes, we hit all the usuals, but also sites like Mashable and all sorts of things. And they would never write about me. Right. An early press agent told me your goal as a marketer should be to get yourself written about on the pages of the newspaper that aren't about your subject. So you should, for a theater producer, I should want to get written about in the real estate section, in the style section, in the business section. If you're a real estate developer, you should get written about in the arts section. That's how you develop awareness. So yeah, that was another big one. I've had two strategies get front page articles in the New York Times, not of the arts and leisure, but of A1. So, wow. But it's trying to come up with what's unique about your business and then doing something that's never been done before.
Yeah, that's incredible too, because I look at what you do and you're working in the arts and, within the arts, it's creating that experience, but then it seems like you're doing that into the marketing. Like you're taking the art of acting and show into the marketing tactics, right? Like it's almost like this is what I've lived forever. I'm just going to do it. And then it starts to hit time and time again. Are you seeing other people trying to do what you're doing now?
To some extent, but look, it's a special alchemy, and it's not just me. It's the shows, it's listening, it's sweat. Look, I've had, a couple dozen that have achieved like massive success, right? I've got a couple hundred more that I did that never went anywhere, that didn't get, written about in my local hometown community paper in Massachusetts. Yeah. So, but that's part of it. It's just like anything else. It's like, ooh, I've got this idea, put it together. It doesn't cost any money. Throw it out there until something hits. And eventually, again, you get better at thinking about what will get attention. And now I just know, like I put things together, and more often than not, I go, oh, that's going to get attention. That's what a writer wants to see come over a press release, like over a wire, or this is what's going to get people talking. Doesn't always work, but I'm more attuned to it now than before.
For sure. So what does your thought process look like when you're trying to market these shows? Do you have a process? Like I actually have a thinking chair where I go and just think, right? And I turn off my phone, and that's kind of where a lot of my good ideas come from. So do you have anything like that you put into practice?
Well, as far as a thinking chair, I do my best thinking when I'm doing some other small activity. So the three best places where I come up with the most ideas are the shower, my car, or the golf course. So I have literally now taken to playing golf by myself with the sole purpose of just walking the fairways because I will come up with ideas. I actually listen to audiobooks now, and they just get me on the golf course, and they get me flowing. So that's the thing. Other than that, though, the specific thing I need to do is I need to determine, like, what is my show about? Like, what's the hook of the show? Why are people interested in it or my product in the first place? So the goat is a good, like, people were fascinated by the goat. So I worked a promotion around the goat. One of the big features of the New York Times front page articles that I got was my revival of Godspell, which I crowdfunded. It was the first ever crowdfunded Broadway musical. So to invest in a Broadway musical, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 or more. Very secret society investing in Broadway shows before what I did. I announced it publicly. I'm crowdfunding it as little as $1,000 at a time. We had over 700 investors. It'd never been done before. We broke this idea that Broadway was only for the super rich, and I got a front page article in the New York Times about it. Why I developed that idea is because I sat down with the author and I said, "What's Godspell about?" And he said, "Godspell is about a community of people coming together." Mm. And I just, to your point, took that artistic message and applied it to the business model. I'll just develop the largest community of investors and producers ever. So I often say to marketers, and so many make this mistake, you can get attention for your business a whole bunch of ways. You could put someone in a penguin suit and have them do cartwheels down the block, right? I think of the, like, air spinners, right? Like the people,
the spinner guys.
That actually, the sign spinners. That will get attention for your business, but it's not going to last. It's not going to break through because it's not connected to your business. The stuff that connects, that causes big change, long-lasting change, is the stuff that's part of your business. It's organic. And every one of the quote-unquote stunts that I've done, the core of the idea has come from what the show is about. So, and I do a lot of coaching and consulting now with people in all sorts of businesses. And one of the first parts of the formula is, what about your product is unique? What is special to people? What's it about? And then we develop something based on that.
I love that, man. So obviously the joy of doing this podcast is I get the opportunity to talk to successful people, however you want to define success. And I get to pick their brain and I get to figure out what it is that they've been able to kind of implement into their life to create that success for themselves. So my question for you is, what is your definition of success? And what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Well, the easy and true answer of success is, I believe, I did a musical based on this actually called Gettin' the Band Back Together. It was about a 40-year-old investment banker who gets fired, has to move back in with his mother in New Jersey. First day back home, his best friend says to him, "Dude, you're back in town. You know what we should do? We should put the band back together." And when I develop a musical or a play, I try to come up with a thesis for each one. And then I prove the thesis. And the thesis for Getting the Band Back Together was true success is defined by doing what you love with the people you love and who love you. And that's really what I believe it's about. So that's what I try to do, the things I love, right? I get passionate about something, I do it. Doesn't mean it's I wanted to make a board game. I made a board game. So I was just passionate about it. You don't have to be defined by whatever your space is. And you can even be passionate about just making money. If that really is a passion, go for it. It's not really what gets me out of bed every day. It's a byproduct. The things I do every day, I'm a big routine guy. So I'm a big believer in a routine. I get up very early. I get up at 5:00 every morning. I do all the things that everyone's talking about nowadays, from meditating to exercising to like a lot of that stuff. I calendar my day. That's a huge thing. I'm a big fan of that. You want to write more? You put down in your calendar, write from 11 to 12, just like you would doctor's appointment. Why is it we show up to every doctor's appointment that's in our calendar? We don't show up to do something, work on whatever business we want to start. So I do a lot of stuff. And more generally, I think what I do to ensure my success is I do this entrepreneurial trick I taught myself called serve the tennis ball. So all entrepreneurs, their responsibility is to start the game. No one is going to start it for you. You have an idea, great. You have to take action on the idea. You have to serve the tennis ball. Hopefully, someone will hit the ball back to you. And then you can serve it back and forth and back and forth. So I'm constantly doing that. Hey, are the rights available for this movie to turn into a musical? Hey, has there ever been a board game for Broadway shows? Hey, I'm constantly reaching out to other writers and think like I'm just serving the tennis ball, waiting for people to hit it back. And eventually you create some momentum in the game. And before you know it, you've achieved some success.
I love it. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, how do people get a hold of you? I know you said you do some coaching and consulting. Is there a place they can go for that, or even get more, your blog that you were talking about? Where's all the good stuff?
So you can find me, if you put my name into Google, a lot of searsperspective.com, but that'll come up with Google me. For those of you not in the theater, and the majority of your listeners, I imagine, are not in the theater, I urge you to check out a new site that I just started by popular demand, frankly, because of so many people wanting me to do what I do for businesses outside the theater, called dramaticmarketing.com. Dramaticmarketing.com. I'm about to release a bunch of these case studies. So I'm about to release some video case studies of my first time, some more detail about that, of Godspell, but of what I've done. So I'm a big believer that how you learn is just looking at case studies of what other people have done. And as you said, steal it, please. I beg you. Swipe it as much as you want. So I'm going to do these video swipe files, if you will. So go to dramaticmarketing.com, sign up, and I'll teach you the formula.
Awesome. I love it, man. So like I said, I wrap up every single interview with this one question. And since this podcast is called The Growth Now Movement, the question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth? The biggest moment of growth I had was when I was at my lowest point. It was a couple years ago. I was a couple months away from opening a Broadway show, and I found myself very short on raising the money. And I thought it was going to be a lot easier. Like most entrepreneurs, we launch a product and we think everyone is going to just line up and buy it. And usually never as many people buy it as you think are going to. And I did a workshop expecting people to line up and invest in the show, and it didn't happen. And I literally had a moment of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And that moment is what defines all successful entrepreneurs, is what you do. Because you can, as Homer Simpson would say, hide under a pile of coats and hope it all goes away. You can sit on your couch and watch Netflix, or you can sit down and say, I'm going to come up with a plan and just keep working until I do what I need to do and get what I want. And that's what I did. That's when I started all those things that I told you I do now. Wake up early, meditate, calendar. I just put myself into hyper overdrive. Not only raised more than enough money than I needed, but that's one of the shows that eventually won me the Tony Award. That's awesome, man. Ken, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your story. And, it's funny, when I got introduced to you, I immediately thought of that Billy Joel song where he says, "The night the lights went out on Broadway." And so I'm excited for the day the lights go back on Broadway and you can truly shine and share your gifts with the world, man. But thank you so much for coming on and doing this. My pleasure. My pleasure. Best of luck to you. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.